insanity.
I do think at a certain point you've made enough money.
Of today's politics.
That's what governments do, is redistribute.
This is the Clarkcast with Matt Clark.
You didn't build that. Somebody else made that happen.
We don't need new taxes. We need new taxpayers.
The Clarkcast begins.
We're going to go bankrupt as a nation.
Right now.
All right. Wow. I can't believe it. It's absolutely astonishing. This is news. Hillary Clinton is running for president. I didn't see that coming. I don't think any of us did. I'm just absolutely shocked right now. And then some gunmen went crazy and unloaded on a Dallas police station. The world is on fire. But we're here together for the next hour. I'm Rich Hoffman. I'm from OvermanWarrior.com. I'm a frequent guest host guest with Matt Clark. Contrary to what you might believe, I have a lot of respect for his radio audience, and I think I have to come clean and give the audience here some news about Matt's condition. You might have heard that he's on a honeymoon and that he's recently married, and that is true, and that's a wonderful thing. And he's, congratulations to him. But at Wham, there has to be some boots on the ground to all the insanity that's going on. And I have to tell everybody that Matt is on a secret mission at the moment. In fact, the next James Bond movie may be scripted after his latest adventure. And I can tell you in 2 weeks, he will be here to tell you what he's uncovered as he travels the globe in pursuit of finding the roots of insanity that have plagued this earth and all the political mechanisms within it. But we won't talk about that until he gets back. As for now, I've got a lot of surprises, a lot of fun things to talk about today. I was on with him about a month ago, middle of May, I believe, and we usually cover a lot of topics during our broadcasts and whiz through a wide variety of topics. And it's nothing usually shocking. I mean, we keep track. I mean, I write a blog. I post up articles every day. Usually they're quite extensive articles, and you can see them at OvermanWarriorsWisdom.com. Written a few novels. I have an online series right now just for people who are looking for an alternative to the kind of things that are going on these days. It's hard to find good conservative, common sense type stories that reflect middle America. And so I have an online series that's on the blog called The Curse of Fort 7 Mile, and it's kind of an old Zorro-esque type story set in a modern day. And those are things that I do to kind of contribute to fixing elements of the Republic that are definitely bad off. But we've talked for a long time about the implications of some of the tragedies we're seeing. And, you have all these years of the Obama presidency now. You had a really bad 8 years with George Bush, for a conservative. I'd say that we didn't get what we thought we were going to get. We ended up with a lot larger government, the TSA, and a whole lot of intrusions that are being debated to this day. But the stories are coming in so fast that you really can't digest it all. Like today, Hillary Clinton announcing that she's going to be president, which, has been projected for years. It's not really news, but she announced today, so it's official, and it was, the fanfare and the popcorn and all the things that go with it from her side of it. And with all the scandals that are behind her, you got to wonder, why she thinks she could actually pull it off. But we've talked about the insanity of some of the things we're witnessing, and then of course the gunmen in Dallas. Really, it's getting worse. The violence is escalating to a point where you have to start taking a reality check and assessing your own situation. Anyway, Matt and I were talking about all these topics on the radio show, like we usually do. But that particular day seemed to be where you start looking at the major stories on that topic. And I came off that show and I went downstairs and talked to my wife. And I'd been putting off a major purchase for a long time just because it was one of those things you consider to be a luxury item, but I don't consider it a luxury item anymore. So it had been on my list since 2003. It's the Smith & Wesson 500 Magnum. It's one of those things that people kind of look at you and say, well, why would you want that? And when and where would you ever think about using it? when you say self-defense, concealed carry, they kind of look at you because it's a hand cannon. I mean, a 500 Magnum, it's the largest, most powerful production handgun in the world. Why wouldn't you carry a 38 snub nose or a 45 or something a little more conventional? And when you start looking at the elements of the way that violence is erupting, you have to be prepared for it. I mean, just the Clinton emails by themselves should be the story. If that took place in the 70s, that would have been a scandal comparable to Watergate. But here in the 2010s to the 20s, it just gets blown off and lost behind the latest Lady Gaga video. Now, you got Lois Lerner, that's still out there. It was only 2 years ago, and the corruption associated with that by itself would be a scandal of epic proportions. You got the Benghazi cover-up, which everybody says is old news, but it's not. It's big news. That's huge stuff. But it's getting lost behind all these headlines. And then you have border violence, the open border issues. You have situations on the border here between Texas and Mexico and Arizona and New Mexico that are every bit as bad and violent as ISIS, but nobody talks about it. It's because it's hidden behind the drug culture. And then behind that is this push to legalize drugs, which then indicates further bad behavior and a depravity in society that you could debate all day long, but it points our overall American culture in a direction that is not reflective of traditional value. And then we just talked about ISIS. You have 50,000 nutcases running around that nobody in the world can seem to put out. And even though you have the greatest military in the world and supposedly a 60-country coalition that could put them down, you could pack all those people in one football stadium here in the United States, and yet we can't stop them from tearing up archaeology all over the Middle East and wreaking havoc and causing death and destruction to lots of innocent people. Nobody cares. Nobody wants to do anything about it. And there's no conviction across the world to do anything about it. And it makes you sick. Then look at all the issues with the Justice Department. Justice Department filled with corruption behind Eric Holder. You could write books. There will be books published for years about all the things that happened under Holder. Yet, with the violence with the police and the Ferguson situation and Baltimore, you have a situation where advocates are saying that we need the Justice Department to control our local police. And if that happens, you have the corrupt people like Holder who are going to be in charge of your local area if this civil rights push gets their way. And it's a dangerous, very dangerous time. I wouldn't want the federal government to be in charge of whether or not a cop comes out to report that someone broke into my car or, there was a trespassing issue on my property. They certainly aren't going to care. At least you can go down to the local sheriff and lobby them and talk to them. But there's a push to get rid of that. It's a very dangerous time we live in. And then you have an education system led by this Common Core issue that has made 2 generations of people pretty much dumbstruck and not able to even process critical thinking. They're not able to deal with one of these stories, let alone all of them together. So my wife and I talked about it after I debated, because it's an expensive gun. We talked about it for quite a long time. And, not a long time in like weeks or months. I've been talking about this thing for years. But we spent a couple hours talking about it after the match show and determined that we were just going to go on down and get it now. Because if things fall off the rocker, I want to be ready. I hope they don't. I hope things last. I hope that our election process holds up. I hope that shows like this can bring up issues that legislators and representatives within the Republic can then ascertain and think about, contemplate, and add some debate to the issue and maybe avert the danger that I think we're all headed for. But I don't have a lot of faith in that happening, and I'm not going to leave my family in a position of jeopardy, trusting anything outside of the property that I control. I hate to say that, but I'm being honest. We all have a responsibility to protect our families and our property, and you have to defend that and use the Second Amendment to do that. And this has been a long thing that I've dealt with. My very first job, right out of high school, I did some college and bounced around and try to find out what you want to do in life. But I sort of settled on being a gunsmith early on at 19 years old. And I wanted to open a little shop and behind our house and have a little private enterprise. And I started down that path, and it was a wonderful path. I felt that I was going to contribute to the safety and security of the United States by supplying Second Amendment believers with their goods and services and keep their guns working right. And, we started having kids, and you start bringing people that are doing firearms around your children. It's probably not the best idea in the world. And being young and I also had the creative thing where I wanted to write books and stuff, and you realize that that part of the industry doesn't like the Second Amendment. So I kind of backed off of it to go do the creative stuff. So I got away from it for a couple decades. But now I see that there's more value in that than all the other creative endeavors and successes that you could possibly build for yourself, whether it be New York culture or the Santa Monica culture that I often make fun of in Hollywood, that thinks that everything in the world lives in that little valley between the hills that divide Las Vegas from Los Angeles, and they forget about the rest of us in the flyover states. And the flyover states are more important. But that's a lot to kind of digest. And I think what we'll do is we'll take a quick break, pay for our airtime here, and then when we come back, I'm going to kind of begin to give you an introduction to what we have in store for you at the bottom of the hour. So stay with us, stay close to your radio, turn it up, call a friend, tell them to come on, and we'll be right back.
Saving the Republic, one broadcast at a time. This is the Clarkcast with Matt Clark. Saving the Republic, one broadcast at a time. The Clarkcast with Matt Clark.
All right, we're back. This was, I have to make a little confession. I'm making a lot of confessions here today. My kids are now in their 20s. I have grandkids now. So I have lived a pretty interesting life, done a lot of things to get to this point. And I've always been concerned, even at the beginning stages of noticing how progressivism was kind of influencing our society. I was a staunch traditionalist and pretty much refusing to buckle on that issue. And this goes all the way back into the 80s that I've kind of held that ground. And obviously over the years, it's moved more to the left. Everything, even the conservative party has moved more to the left, but I haven't. And I wouldn't say that I'm radical because of it. I know what we used to be in the United States, and I'm going to insist that we maintain that and stay there. And if the rest of the world wants to go off the cliff, I'm not going to follow them. So, raising a family, you have to somehow pass those values off on them. And to help do that, every New Year's, I didn't want to teach my kids that going out and partying and doing kinds of crazy stuff was good and right. So when they were 11 through probably 19, every year my family did a Dirty Harry marathon at New Year's, starting New Year's Eve, running through like 8 o'clock at night, New Year's Day. And we'd take little breaks here and there, and we'd watch the ball drop and all that. But we pretty much watched those religiously every year. And we started with the first movie, Dirty Harry, went through Magnum Force, Enforcer, Sudden Impact, and then Deadpool, which take place, I think it was like 73 or 74 that the first Dirty Harry film came out. And then 1989 or 88 was the Deadpool. You might remember the Deadpool because that's when Jim Carrey sort of got his big start as an actor under Clint Eastwood's tutelage. But the best one of all of them, I think, was Sudden Impact. And that was the one that really, as a director, Clint Eastwood was starting to really flex his muscles that you see today. That's the fine director that he is now. But he started to really come out in Sudden Impact. And Sudden Impact is a big movie for Smith & Wesson. They featured, of course, the .44 Magnum, which at the time was, considered to be the most powerful handgun in the world. And it really, you'll remember that was the famous "Make My Day" line that lasted. And George Bush Sr. used that a spin on that in his run in '88, where he said, "Hey, please, make my 24-hour time period speech," which only a politician could screw up with a Clint Eastwood line. But back then, the movie Sudden Impact was it wasn't about violence, and none of the Dirty Harry films I thought was about violence, even though violence is certainly a part of it. It's about the individual, which is represented by the Harry Callahan character, Clint Eastwood, being a cop in an increasingly progressive society. In this case, it was San Francisco, and the world was changing around him. He wasn't going to change, and he dealt with things the way old school America dealt with them, and the mayors and politicians of the time didn't want anything to do with it. And so by the time Sudden Impact came around, the Dirty Harry character had the mobsters after him, every organized crime agent, every street thug, everybody was pretty much out to get Dirty Harry. And I kind of wanted, even though it's fun and it's some of it's just macho humor and that kind of thing, I wanted to convey to my kids that, hey, if you do the right things in life, you're going to have enemies and they're going to come after you, and you got to be able to stand your ground. And part of standing that ground, unfortunately, means sometimes you're going to be called to task, and you better be ready when you're called to task. And I could tell you from personal experience, violence does happen sometimes. Violence comes into play. But most of the time, good debate can alleviate bad things from happening. So it's important that you have an open dialogue. First Amendment is extremely important for that very reason, because it quells a lot of the things that can erupt into issues. But when you get in with my Urban Warriors Wisdom blog, it does provoke a lot of anxiety among people who are doing bad things. And I know that. But again, I have a little bit of veteran experience in that. I'm not trying to make a career out of being a whistleblower or anything like that. I have other things I can do to take care of my livelihood. That I do in this radio show and things along those lines. I do because it's part of the fight, the fight against progressivism. And when I showed my kids the Dirty Harry movies, that's what I wanted to convey to them, is that, hey, America used to have these values, and these are the challenges that were exhibited in those films. And this is what America used to be like, and this is where it's going, and you got to figure out where you want to be on it. And those, film can be a reference point for how you want to build your personal philosophy. It's what literature and art should do in any culture. But at the bottom of the hour, when we come back from the news and break, there's a special treat that I have for you. And then on the backside of that is a guest that I have, a person I've known for quite a while. His name is George Lang. He's involved with Second Call Defense, and that Second Call Defense is who you call if someone comes into your house and you have to go through the unfortunate situation of removing their threat assessment with a firearm. So we're going to have a good little talk about that in the next half hour. But at the bottom of the hour, before he comes on, we're going to have a song by Clint Eastwood and T.G. Shepherd that came out as just after the movie Sudden Impact. And if you listen to the words, you'll see how far we have slid as a society, how different. Imagine this song that you're going to hear coming out today. Imagine it playing on the radio in your car, just driving down the road, or hearing it talked about on like the Today Show or ABC News in the Morning, any of those programs. Back in the 80s, the mid 80s, when this song came out, it was considered to be mainstream stuff. I mean, it was a little thought of Clint Eastwood. Clint Eastwood had a reputation for violence and the gritty kind of humor he has. So it wasn't radical for the day. It was sort of considered to be normal. Now, I think Clint Eastwood the other day said something about Caitlyn Jenner. He said, "Caitlyn who?" Or Caitlyn somebody. And that was a major story. And that just tells you that we have slid. It's a good measuring stick for gauging kind of where we've ended up. And when this song comes on, listen to the words very carefully, and you'll see what I'm talking about. See you in a few minutes.
This is the Clarkcast with Matt Clark. This is the Clarkcast with Matt Clark. Call Matt now, 734-822-1600.
Are you going into the song? All right, okay. All right, great. Well, we're in a few moments we're going to have this old song from T.G. Shepherd come on. That it's a classic. It's one of my favorites. It's a great segue into our next guest, which is George Lang from Second Call Defense. So let's go to the song.
Well, it was going down on the bad part of town at an all-night grocery store. The old man there, his hands in the air, his customers on the floor.
Or we can go straight to George.
Took all the money and all of his hard-earned pay, but then a tall man stepped in with a cynical grin and said, "Go ahead, make my day." Somewhere a girl's walking all alone, and now it's getting dark. She knows
all right, George,
she
you there?
better hurry home, so she cuts right through the park. She finds herself surrounded, oh, she'll never get away. But then from behind a tree trunk, a voice said, "Punk, go ahead, make my day." Oh, we love to hear him say, "Go ahead and make my day." Smith, Wesson, and him just surrounded them, said, "Go ahead, punk, make my day."
Yeah.
By mistake, a couple walked into a bar where a motorcycle gang hangs out. They started coming on to his bride and slapping him all about. They were buying drinks for the house and using his money to pay. But it was last call for alcohol. Go ahead, make my day. Whoa, we love to hear him say, "Go ahead and make my day." He just stood in the door with the motorboat and said, "Go ahead, punk, make my day." So all you goons, you punks, you creeps who hide out in the night, don't try to cop insanity. You better start doing things right. If you don't heed this warning, then you better start learning to pray that you never have to hear him whisper, "Go ahead, make my day." We love to hear him say, "Go ahead and make my day." Whether Smith and Wesson, they taught him a lesson. Go ahead, punk, make my day. We love to hear him say, "Go ahead and make my day." He just fired his gun and then there were none. Go ahead, punk, make my day. No trial, no reports to file. Do you feel lucky, punk? Man's got to know his limitations.
All right. Great. That's can you imagine that song coming out today? My goodness, but that's a great old classic from the 80s, from from my perspective, a much more civilized time. I never thought that I would be one to look back at a time when I was young and say, "Oh, remember those days," but remember those days. And if a goon or a punk or a freak who hides out in the night comes to your house to to molest your private property in any way that causes a threat to your person, and you have to use a firearm in self-defense to protect that private property, the first thing you should do is you call 911, and you get the police come out, get a report. But the very next thing that you should do is call second call defense. And with that, I'd like to bring up George Lang, a good friend of mine, and he's going to tell us all about it. George?
Rich, how are you, my friend?
Hey, it's just a beautiful day to be alive.
It is. It's a great day down here in Ohio as well. You know, the whole premise behind second call defense, Rich, is if you are prepared to use your weapon to defend your life or the life of a loved one, we are fully prepared to defend you from the legal and the financial aftermath that will occur, the financial devastation that will occur in the aftermath of a perfectly legitimate self-defense shooting.
That's right, and that's the one thing when you're in a situation, and you shouldn't think about it because it's instinctive. But when you're in a situation where you're facing down a hostile situation, and you're wondering, you don't want to think, oh, what about the court implications of this afterwards? You need to have a clear conscience to just deal with the situation as it presents itself, and that's where the most comprehensive protection for firearm defense in America takes place.
That's correct. And it really starts way before that situation occurs. We have in-depth and extensive training. We don't train you how to shoot a gun. There's other organizations that do that. We don't train you how to mentally be ready. We train you from a legal perspective what to do and how to handle it. And, you mentioned that 911 call. It's so important that you understand how to handle that call, what to say, more importantly, what not to say.
Yeah.
Because make no doubt about it, those tapes are rolling, and those operators are trained to get you to speak. And that's the last thing we want you to do. You've just been through perhaps one of the most traumatic experiences in your life.
And you're all shaky, and you're nervous.
You've had an incredible adrenaline dump. You can't think straight. If you're a police officer in just about every jurisdiction in America, and you are involved in a shooting, you are sequestered for up to 3 days. Mm-hmm. Media can't talk to you. Internal affairs can't talk to you. The only one that can talk to you is a police psychologist. That's because it takes that long for your mind to decompress and figure out what just happened. Right. And we want that same respect for our members.
Yeah, and on that 911 call, if you give details about what, like the victim is bleeding, and they may be in a state where they're dying, and you're giving descriptions about their behavior, that could definitely be used against you in court later. And you just want to give the facts, you want to give the essence, you want to get the police there in a timely manner so that they can get on the scene and relieve you of that obligation. But that's the kind of thing that you're there to provide for people.
You're exactly right. The purpose of the 911 call is to get help, nothing more. Even if you say something like, "I really didn't mean to shoot him," well, right. now you've just opened yourself up to a tremendous civil liability.
Yep.
If you didn't mean to shoot him, well, then it was an accident. If it was an accident, you can be sued civilly and lose everything you have. And your brain just can't think straight right after that traumatic, stressful situation.
Yep, that's exactly right. So, we're going to get in a little more detail about how people can get involved with second call defense, I think, towards the after we take a break here in a moment. But how long has second call defense been around? I remember you telling me about it when it was just coming about, but it's not that old, but it's had great success.
Yeah, we've launched a little over 2 years ago. We've had over 10,000 people enroll in our program. We are in all 50 states, and we are closely affiliated with the NRA. We're actually backed by the NRA-endorsed insurance plan.
And you guys are every single gun event there is nowadays, including the one that was just in Nashville. I mean, you have a tremendous presence everywhere.
Yeah, we do really well at the prepper shows going on around the country as well. That's something we're just starting to get into, but we definitely have a big presence. And it's really a shame. It's a shame an organization like ours needs to even exist. Forget the fact, Rich, that the guy breaking into your house or coming at you in the park is a recidivistic maggot strung out on crack cocaine. Forget that.
Yep.
Once he's coming at you, he is the criminal. You are the victim.
Yep.
Once you exercise what I believe to be your God-given right to self-defense, and you pull that trigger, at best, in all 50 states, you are the person of interest. He now becomes the victim. You become the criminal. And the laws are so upside down.
Yeah, you know how it is. I mean, you're heavily involved in political ins and outs, and there's been a progressive influence since the time of that song we just played to now, where private property has been deemed as something that should come under attack. People shouldn't have it. There's more of a push to go more towards all government subsidies of some kind, whether it's housing or property development. And so private property is under attack, and the criminal element is thriving in that environment.
Yeah, and keep in mind, gun control doesn't affect the criminal element. You and I both know we are overregulated, overburdened, overtaxed, and overgoverned.
Right.
And I would argue it started way before T.G. Shepard came out with that song in the 80s.
Yeah, it
goes
certainly
back
did.
to FDR.
Yeah, it certainly did. That was when people began to see the writing on the wall, and that's why I like those old movies, and that's why they wrote songs about it. But even back then, a majority of people that we knew believed like we do right now. But now it's definitely a minority, and those who are in the minority, who have a lot to protect and a lot to look out for, need to know what kind of options are in your favor, because there's not much. And second call defense is certainly one of those friends that you have out there in the wasteland of progressive society.
That's right. And what's really important, you had mentioned your first call is a 911, your second call is the second call defense, where we will have an attorney on the phone within about 1 minute of you having called. It goes to an answering service, and depending what state you're in, we're going to match you up with an attorney practiced or licensed in that state, and you're going to have an attorney on the line with you before the cops even show up. So we don't even want you talking to the police. You just hand the phone over, and the attorney will take over right there.
That's a invaluable asset. Well, let's go to a break, and on the back side of that break, we'll talk about something that's on your website. We'll get into more information about how people can become involved with second call defense, and we're going to go over some of the 5 self-defense myths that are out there that people believe can destroy their life, and that's one thing that second call defense can help protect against. So let's go to a couple of commercials, and we'll be right back.
This is the Clarkcast with Matt Clark. This is the Clarkcast with Matt Clark.
Oh, good to be back. Hard to believe that the hour flies by this fast. It's just not enough time and too many bad things going on to cover them all. But right now we're talking about self-defense at your property and using second call defense as a mechanism to protect you from any kind of aftermath that might occur in a home defense situation. And we're on the phone with George Lang. So, George, I was going through all your stuff, and one of the things that kind of came to my mind was the 5 self-defense myths that people believe can destroy their lives, which plays into part in what do you make a decision to use a firearm to deal with a situation like that. And one of those is homeowners policies, self-defense insurance, umbrella coverage, savings, and retirement situations, and then the castle doctrines and stand your ground laws. You want to elaborate on any of those topics?
Yeah, sure. Most people assume that their homeowners is going to cover this, or that they're going to have if they have an umbrella policy, they're covered. Homeowners does not cover self-defense shootings. And people that even have self-defense insurance, there's even a downside to that. If you notice earlier, I said we are backed by the NRA-endorsed insurance plan. Right. Here's a problem with any insurance in America as it relates to self-defense. Insurance cannot cover you while you have committed an intentional act. And when that guy broke into your house intent on killing you, you intended to stop him. The other thing insurance cannot do, it cannot cover you while you have committed a crime. So it can't cover you for the commission of a crime. And while you have been charged criminally, insurance cannot cover you. So even the self-defense insurance programs out there, and there are a few, the fallback to all of them is they are a reimbursement. So they will pay you after the fact when charges have been dropped or when you have been proven innocent. The problem with that, Rich, is most people don't have $10, $20, $30, $40, $50,000 laying around to fight the legal system waiting to get reimbursed. That's why we've developed a unique way to get the money to our members up front, real time as they need it. And the NRA Self-Defense Insurance Program doesn't reimburse our members. It reimburses a foundation that we're affiliated with that advances the money up front.
And that's extremely important, because the whole point of protecting your property is to protect your property. And if you spend 2 years fighting this thing out in court, and the insurance companies hold up any kind of any kind of payout until after the case is settled, and then you can have another 6 or 7 months of that, you could be broke and you lost everything by then anyway. And then you would have accomplished nothing and then found yourself in a lot of trouble because of it.
On our website, Overman, we have case study after case study of people just in the situation you've described or worse. They didn't have anything for reimbursement. Harold Fish spent over 5 years in prison, ultimately found innocent, but was penniless and financially devastated as a result of just fighting for his freedom.
Yep. And it's your right to fight for your freedom and fight to protect your property. And yet, because of the way that the progressive laws have emerged over the years, and a lot of them are well-intentioned legislation that has just spiraled out of control. A lot of the laws that are out there on the books were designed to make our society better and safer. But you have to have good people who are in charge at the top in order for it to work. And when you have people like Hillary Clinton that dump emails and lie and cheat and try to play the system against people, you can't trust all that. And so it's spiraled out of control. And now we end up in a situation where you have all these progressive laws. None of us can know them all. There's no way you could. And you're at the mercy of the legal system, which you need some sort of defense yourself to deal with. And that's one of the things that Second Call Defense offers. And I think that because of this radio show, you have a discount for people to announce?
Yeah, our prices range from $8.95 a month for our basic plan to about $35.95 a month for the Cadillac plan, if you will.
Yeah.
And anybody that wants to go to our website, which is www.secondcalldefense.org, if they want to sign up, if they'll just type Overman Warrior, Overman, OW, some derivative of Overman Warrior in our referral code, I'll make sure they get their first month free.
Now, that's a tremendous bargain and a great thing to have for anybody out there who's even thinking about it, because you want to try it out. Gives everybody a chance to test drive it and put your mind at ease a little bit. But you know that Overman Warrior's Wisdom, the blog that I run, which you know quite well about. It's one of those things. It's a watchdog that started in local community of southern Cincinnati, southern Ohio, and politics that emerged around part of town you and I reside in. But it's emerged into something that's nationwide. And the more of these stories you hear about out there, that you see a lot of these cases where people try to defend their property, and they think it's the Old West, which private property was a lot more valued 100 years ago, and that you shoot the gun at somebody who's trying to assault you, and they go down, and that's the end of the story. That's just the beginning of the story. And the more of these national cases you find out about, you see so many people losing their livelihoods just because they try to defend themselves or protect their families. And it's tragic. And it breaks my heart every time I hear about it. So I'm happy that you're able to tie in the Overman Warrior's Wisdom blog site into giving people an opportunity to do something that's really, really good for them. And that's to be a part of the Second Call Defense.
Well, and one more point I'll leave you with, Overman. All of the Second Amendment legal defense experts that I have spoken with agree, and they say, had George Zimmerman had competent legal advice from the very beginning, we would have never heard of his name.
Oh, that's absolutely true. And how many times he's found himself now that he's a target. He gets harassed by everybody who wants to make a name for themselves, and that he had that recent domestic, recent road rage incident where he was involved in, a guy shooting at him. He could have put that fire out at the very beginning just by calling Second Call Defense, getting some advice on what not to say, because all that was used against him. It all turned out to be he was innocent. But look what he went through, and look what the nation went through as a result.
Yeah, 6 weeks, over 40 hours of video and audio tape. An attorney never would have allowed him to do that. 6 weeks before he talked to an attorney.
Oh, and see, and that the damage that he did, he put himself in a huge financial burden. That, luckily the case was such a big case that some attorneys came on and signed on to take it just because of the publicity they got. But if he'd been any other person or any other circumstance, he would have lost everything he had in the duration that it took to get that case settled, and then all the social implications that came as a result of it. Well, George, I really appreciate you coming on. I think it's a great thing. We're close to the same age, so you've seen how things have changed over the last few years, and there's very few weapons in our arsenal to fight against progressivism. And in my opinion, second call defense is one of the best. And I really appreciate what you do out there. And hopefully everybody will take advantage of your offer and go to secondcalldefense.com and use the Overman Warrior tag and get your free month.
Thanks, and you keep fighting for liberty and freedom, Rich.
Absolutely, man. Thanks a lot. And you know what? We're out of time. I can't believe it, but it's been wonderful.
For show
I'll be
highlights
back
and more,
Oh.
next week for
visit
Matt.
www.clarkcast.com.